The other aliens called her the Tiny Terror. Turi walked through the crowded main corridor of Nexus 7 space station, her small purple feet making soft tapping sounds against the metal floor. At just 3 feet tall, she barely reached the waist of most other species. Her large, silver eyes and delicate antennae would have made her look cute, if everyone wasn't so terrified of her. A massive Chronaxian warrior, covered in battle armor, quickly stepped aside as she approached. His 4 arms tensed, ready for trouble. Turi pretended not to notice, but she felt his fear clearly in her mind. She always felt their fear. "Mani, is that her?" A young Ventarian child whispered too loudly, pointing with one of its tentacles. "Quiet." The mother pulled her child back. "Don't look at her. Don't even think too hard around her." Turi kept walking, her face emotionless even as their thoughts hammered at her mind. She couldn't block them out. No one had ever taught her how. Being a Myrthan meant always hearing others' thoughts and feelings, whether she wanted to or not. The station's artificial sun was starting its daily cycle, turning the metal corridors golden. Morning meant breakfast time, and Turi's stomach rumbled. She headed toward the food court, watching as other aliens scrambled to finish their meals or pack up their trays when they saw her coming. "Security, this is level 3. The Myrthan is entering the food court." A guard spoke quietly into his comm unit. He thought he was being subtle, but Turi heard both his words and his thoughts. 2 robotic security drones buzzed quietly overhead, their cameras focused on her. They followed her everywhere on the station. After what happened 3 months ago, when that drunk hexapod had tried to push her around, the station's management wasn't taking any chances. The hexapod had spent 2 weeks in medical, babbling about nightmares. Turi hadn't meant to hurt him. She just got scared, and her powers lashed out. She picked her usual table, the one in the corner where she could see everyone. The food court vendor, a kind old Martian with gray skin, used a mechanical arm to deliver her breakfast from a safe distance. At least he still served her, even if he wouldn't come close. "Thank you," Turi said softly. Her voice was high and musical, like wind chimes. The vendor nodded quickly and retreated. As she ate her bowl of nutrient grains, Turi watched the morning crowd. Families huddled together. Business aliens made deals. Station workers rushed to their shifts. Everyone living their lives, connecting, touching, being close to each other. Everything she couldn't have. A group of young aliens her age played some kind of card game a few tables away. One of them glanced at her, then quickly looked away when their eyes met. Turi felt the spike of panic in his mind, saw the memory of stories he'd heard about Myrthans who could drive people insane with a thought. She looked down at her food, antenna drooping slightly. She was 13 standard years old enough to understand why they feared her, young enough to still wish things were different. On her homeworld, she would have been learning to control her abilities by now. But her parents had died in a space accident when she was small, leaving her stuck on the station, alone among aliens who only knew Myrthans from scary stories. Turi had finished her breakfast in silence, trying to build stronger walls around her mind. It never worked very well, but she kept trying. As she stood to leave, she felt a new mind approaching. Something different, something she'd never felt before. She turned around, curious despite herself. Through the crowd, she saw a human female walking into the food court, looking around with interest. There was something strange about the human's thoughts. They felt muffled, unclear, like trying to read words through foggy glass. Turi stayed perfectly still, watching. She had never met a human before. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. Sarah Chen carried her tray through the food court, looking for a place to sit. It was her first day on Nexus 7, and everything fascinated her. Aliens of all shapes and sizes filled the large room, eating foods that looked nothing like Earth cuisine. The smell of spices from 100 worlds filled the air. She noticed something odd. In the corner of the busy food court, there was a completely empty area except for one small alien sitting alone. The purple-skinned creature couldn't have been more than 3 feet tall, with delicate antennae and large silver eyes. Sarah's xenoanthropologist training kicked in. Those were classic Myrthan features. What really caught her attention was how other aliens acted around this area. They walked in wide circles to avoid it, like water flowing around a rock. Even the cleaning robots stayed away. "Miss, please don't go that way," a station guard whispered urgently as Sarah started walking toward the empty section. "That's the Myrthan girl. It's not safe." Sarah smiled politely. "Thank you for your concern, but studying isolated species is literally my job." She kept walking, ignoring his worried look. Terry watched the human approach with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She tried to read the human's mind, but it was like trying to catch smoke with her hands. She could feel emotions, interest, excitement, a gentle kind of warmth. But the thoughts themselves stayed just out of reach. "Hi there. Mind if I join you?" Sarah asked, already putting her tray down. She sat before Kateri could answer, making several nearby aliens gasp. Kateri stared at the human, antenna twitching nervously. You shouldn't sit here," she said in her wind chime voice. "I'm dangerous." Sarah took a bite of her chocolate cake. "Are you planning to hurt me?" "No," Kateri said quickly, "but sometimes things happen when I get scared or upset. I can't always control it." "Ah, you mean your psychic abilities?" Sarah nodded. "That's actually fascinating. I've read that young Myrthans need training to control their powers, but I've never had the chance to meet one before. I'm Sarah Chen, by the way. I'm a xenoanthropologist. That means I study different alien cultures and how they interact." Kiri's silver eyes widened. The human knew about Myrthans but wasn't afraid. And she couldn't read her thoughts properly. This had never happened before. "Would you like to try some cake?" Sarah pushed her plate slightly toward Kateri. "It's chocolate. One of Earth's best inventions, if you ask me." Kateri looked at the brown substance suspiciously. "Why aren't you scared of me?" she asked instead of answering. "Everyone else runs away." Sarah's eyes softened. "Because I don't think you're dangerous. I think you're just a kid who needs help learning to control her abilities. No one's born knowing how to handle power. We all need teachers." Kateri felt tears forming in her eyes, but held them back. She reached out carefully and took a tiny piece of the cake. As soon as it touched her tongue, her antenna shot straight up in surprise. "This is amazing." Sarah laughed, a warm sound that made several nervous aliens jump. "See, Earth's got some good things to offer. Listen, I'm going to be on the station for 6 months doing research. Maybe we could talk more. I'd love to learn about your experiences here." For the first time in years, Kateri felt something new in her chest. Hope. She couldn't read the human's thoughts clearly, but she could feel Sarah's sincerity. There was no fear, no hatred, just genuine interest and kindness. "I'd like that," Kateri said quietly. Around them, the food court had gone completely silent. Everyone watched in amazement as the dangerous little Myrthan and the seemingly crazy human shared chocolate cake and talked like old friends. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple meal would change not just their lives, but the entire galaxy's understanding of both species. 3 weeks had passed since the chocolate cake incident. Sarah sat in her small station apartment, reviewing her notes on her tablet when her door chime rang. "Come in, Kateri," she called out. She could tell it was the young Myrthan because the security drone's hunting always gave her away. The door slid open, and Kateri entered, her silver eyes bright with excitement. "I did it again," she announced proudly. "I walked past the pet shop, and even when the Jovian singing birds started screaming, I didn't accidentally make anything float." Sarah beamed at her young friend. "That's fantastic. Your control is getting better every day." She patted the couch beside her, and Kateri hopped up, her feet dangling above the floor. What had started as research sessions had turned into daily meetings. Sarah had discovered something remarkable. Humans' natural resistance to psychic powers made them perfect training partners for young Murthans. When Kitiri's powers flared up, Sarah's mind acted like a steady rock in a stormy sea, helping the young alien regain control. "Can we try the hard exercise today?" Kitiri asked, antenna quivering with anticipation. Sarah checked her tablet's readings. "You mean levitating objects while staying calm? Are you sure? Yesterday was pretty intense. Please." Kitiri's silver eyes grew bigger. "I've been practicing the breathing exercises you taught me." "All right." Sarah agreed, setting up small objects on her coffee table, a pen, a cup, and a small ball. "Remember, the goal isn't to lift them. The goal is to stay calm while using your powers." Kitiri nodded seriously. She closed her eyes, her antenna moving gently as she focused. The pen began to float, wobbling slightly. "Good," Sarah said softly. "Now I'm going to think about something surprising. Keep the pen steady." Sarah thought about riding a roller coaster, one of the few experiences that came through clearly to Kitiri's psychic senses. Usually this would startle the young Murthan enough to send objects flying across the room. The pen wobbled sharply, but stayed floating. Kitiri's face scrunched up in concentration, using the breathing techniques Sarah had taught her. After a few seconds, the pen steadied again. "Excellent." Sarah clapped, making Kitiri open her eyes. The pen dropped gently back to the table. "You're making incredible progress." A chime from Sarah's tablet interrupted their celebration. It was a message from station security. "Dr. Chen, please report to Chief Administrator Zax's office immediately regarding your unauthorized training sessions with the Murthan." Kitiri's antenna drooped. "They're going to make you stop helping me, aren't they? Everyone thinks I'm too dangerous." Sarah stood up, straightening her jacket. "No, they're not. You know why?" She smiled at Kitiri. "Because in 3 weeks of training, you haven't had a single accident. We have data proving you're learning control. They can't argue with results." "But what if they try to make you leave?" Kitiri's voice trembled. "Everyone else always leaves." Sarah knelt down to look Kitiri in the eyes. "Listen to me carefully. Humans have a saying, 'Friend in need is a friend indeed.' It means we don't abandon our friends when things get tough. I'm not going anywhere." Kitiri suddenly hugged Sarah, something she'd never done before. Sarah hugged back, feeling the slight tremor in the small alien's shoulders. "Now," Sarah said, standing up, "would you like to come with me to see Administrator Zax? It's time they saw what a young Murthan can do when someone believes in her." Kitiri straightened up, trying to look brave. "Will you hold my hand if I get nervous?" "Of course." Sarah took Kitiri's small purple hand in hers. "Just remember your breathing, and remember you're not alone anymore." As they walked through the station corridors together, followed by the ever-present security drones, other aliens stared in amazement. The sight of the dangerous little Murthan holding hands with a human was something no one had ever expected to see. But then again, humans had a habit of doing the unexpected. And this was just the beginning. The meeting with Administrator Zax didn't go as planned. As Sarah and Kitiri waited in the outer office, 3 rough-looking aliens watched them from across the room. Sarah noticed their suspicious behavior, but tried to keep Kitiri calm by talking about their next training session. "After we're done here, maybe we can try." Sarah stopped mid-sentence as one of the aliens moved suddenly. Everything happened very fast. The largest alien, a scaly draconid, activated a device that filled the room with thick smoke. Another one, moving with surprising speed, grabbed Kitiri. The third pulled out a weapon, pointing it at Sarah. "Nobody move." The armed alien shouted, "The Murthan comes with us." Kitiri's panic hit like a tidal wave. Her silver eyes went wide with terror, and her antenna stood straight up. Objects around the room began to shake. The lights flickered wildly. "Let her go," Sarah shouted, taking a step forward despite the weapon. "You're scaring her." "That's the point," the draconid laughed. "Once she loses control, her powers will be perfect for our operations. A few scared people, a little chaos. He never finished his sentence. Kitiri's fear exploded outward in a massive psychic wave. Every loose object in the room flew in different directions. The lights burst, showering sparks. The smugglers dropped to their knees, clutching their heads and screaming as Kitiri's terrified thoughts invaded their minds. But Sarah stayed standing. While everyone else in the room was overwhelmed by the psychic storm, Sarah pushed through it. Her mind, naturally resistant to psychic powers, acted like a lighthouse in Kitiri's mental storm. "Kitiri," Sarah called out, fighting against the wind of flying objects. "Focus on my voice. Remember your breathing." Kitiri floated in the air, her eyes glowing silver with uncontrolled power. Papers, furniture, and even the smaller aliens swirled around her like a tornado. The security drone sparked and crashed to the ground. Sarah kept moving forward, step by difficult step. "Remember the exercises. Find my mind, Kitiri. Use it like we practiced." Through her panic, Kitiri felt Sarah's steady presence. Like grabbing a rope in a storm, she latched onto the human's calm thoughts. Slowly, the objects stopped spinning. "That's it," Sarah encouraged, finally reaching Kitiri. She held out her arms. "I've got you. You're safe." Kitiri fell from the air into Sarah's arms, shaking and crying. The floating objects dropped to the ground with loud crashes. The smugglers lay unconscious, their minds overwhelmed by the psychic backlash. Station security burst into the room, led by Administrator Zax himself. They stopped in shock at the scene. The unconscious smugglers, the destroyed office, and in the middle of it all, a human calmly holding a crying Myrthan child. "Impossible," Zax whispered. His species had two mouths, and both were hanging open. "She should have destroyed everything. Everyone." "She didn't," Sarah said firmly, still holding Kitiri, "because she's learning control. And because she's not alone anymore." Kitiri looked up at Sarah with tired eyes. "I was so scared," she whispered. "But I felt your mind. Like in training." "You did wonderfully," Sarah assured her. "When you got scared, you found an anchor, just like we practiced." Though she looked around at the destroyed office with a small smile, "We might need to work on reducing property damage." Kitiri gave a weak laugh, which made several security officers step back nervously. Administrator Zax straightened his uniform, looking thoughtful. "Dr. Chen, it seems I may have underestimated the value of your training sessions." He glanced at the unconscious smugglers. "Perhaps we should discuss expanding your program." Sarah nodded, but her focus stayed on Kitiri. "How are you feeling? Want to get some chocolate cake after this?" Kitiri's antenna perked up slightly. "With extra frosting. After what you just handled, double extra frosting." As security led the smugglers away, word of what happened spread through the station. The story grew with each telling. How a human had walked through a psychic storm, how a young Myrthan had protected herself without killing anyone, and how maybe, just maybe, humans and Myrthans had something special to teach each other. Sarah sat in the station's medical bay, surrounded by beeping machines and curious doctors of various species. Kitiri sat next to her, holding her hand while the doctors conducted their tests. Fascinating. Dr. Excel, a tall blue-skinned Andorian, stared at the brain scan results floating in the holographic display. "Look at how the human brain responds to psychic energy." It had been 2 days since the smuggler incident. Instead of punishing them, Administrator Zax had ordered a full scientific study of Sarah and Kitiri's unique connection. The station's best doctors wanted to understand why humans could resist Myrthan powers. "See here." Dr. Excel pointed at the image of Sarah's brain. "When Kitiri uses her powers, the human's neural patterns create a sort of shield. But not just a shield. It's more like a stabilizer." Kitiri looked confused. "What does that mean?" Sarah smiled at her young friend. "It means humans don't just resist psychic powers. Our brains actually help calm them down, like a shock absorber. Or like a psychic anchor," another doctor added, his eye stalks waving with excitement. That's why you could walk through her power storm. Your mind wasn't just protecting you. It was helping stabilize her abilities. News of their discovery spread quickly through the station. Soon, Sarah's small office was flooded with messages from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council itself sent representatives to investigate. This could change everything, a council member said, watching through a window as Sarah and Kitiri practiced their exercises. We've always struggled to help young Myrthans control their powers. The death rate during training. Death rate. Sarah interrupted sharply. Kitiri's antenna drooped. She hadn't known about this. The council member nodded sadly. Many young Myrthans lose control completely. Without proper guidance, their powers can turn inward, causing permanent damage. That's why so many are isolated, like Kitiri was. Better alone than dead. Sarah finished, her voice hard. She put an arm around Kitiri's shoulders. Well, that stops now. If human minds can help stabilize their powers, we can prevent those deaths. Kitiri looked up at her friend. Could other humans help other Myrthans like me? That's exactly what we want to find out, the council member said. But we need to run more tests. Carefully controlled studies. Perhaps if you both come to our main facility. No, Sarah said firmly. Kitiri isn't a lab experiment. She's a child who needs support and training. If you want to study our methods, you can do it here, while we continue our normal sessions. The council member's face changed color, his species' way of showing surprise. You dare refuse the Galactic Council. Humans dare a lot of things, Sarah smiled, especially when protecting our friends. Kitiri stood straighter, her antenna high with confidence she hadn't shown before. I want to stay with Sarah. She's teaching me things the council never did, like how to be strong without being scary. Later that evening, Sarah and Kitiri sat in their usual spot in the food court, sharing their traditional chocolate cake. Around them, other station residents no longer moved away in fear. Some even waved or smiled. Sarah, Kitiri asked, licking frosting off her fingers. Do you think other humans will want to help Myrthans like me? Sarah thought about her home planet, about how humans had always reached out to help others, even when it seemed dangerous. I think, she said carefully, that once humans learn there are children out there who need help, they'll be lining up to volunteer. Even though we're dangerous. Because you're not dangerous. You just need someone who isn't afraid to show you how to be safe. Sarah grinned. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's not being afraid of things we probably should be afraid of. Kitiri giggled, a sound that once would have sent people running but now just made nearby aliens smile. The station's lights reflected off her silver eyes as she looked at her future. No longer alone, no longer feared, and ready for whatever came next. But even she couldn't have guessed what would happen when the Myrthan High Council learned about Sarah's discovery. The Myrthan ship was massive and crystal-like, casting rainbow reflections across Nexus 7's viewing windows as it docked. Kitiri pressed her face against the glass, her antenna trembling with nervous energy. They're here, she whispered. The High Council. Sarah stood beside her, watching 5 tall Myrthans glide through the airlock. Unlike Kitiri's purple skin, the council members were deep blue, a sign of their age and power. Their silver eyes seemed to glow as they surveyed the welcome party. Administrator Zach stepped forward to greet them, but the lead council member walked straight past him towards Sarah and Kitiri. So, his voice echoed in everyone's minds, making several station staff wince. This is the human who claims to understand Myrthan training better than we do. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I don't claim to understand it better. I just found a different way to help. The council member, High Elder Vex, according to the introduction Zax was trying to give, looked down at Kitiri. Show me what you've learned, child. Kitiri took a deep breath, just like Sarah had taught her. She raised her hand, and a nearby cup floated smoothly into the air. No shaking, no accidental energy bursts, just perfect control. Parlor tricks, another council member scoffed. Try something harder. 5 more objects rose to join the cup, spinning in a complex pattern. Kituri's face showed concentration but not strain. When she finally set everything down, not a drop had been spilled from the cup. Impossible, High Elder Vex said. A child your age shouldn't have such control without proper Myrthan training. She had proper training. Sarah stepped forward. Just not the kind you're used to. The High Elder's eyes narrowed. You think a few months with a human equals generations of Myrthan teaching methods. Our powers are beyond your primitive understanding. Sarah felt Kituri tense beside her, afraid her friend would be sent away. Making a decision that would change everything, Sarah squared her shoulders. Then test me, she said clearly. The whole room went silent. What did you say? High Elder Vex asked. The trial of resonance, Sarah said, making the council members stir in surprise that she knew about it. It's your highest test of psychic understanding. Let me take it. Absolutely not. Kituri grabbed Sarah's hand. Sarah, that trial, even adult Myrthans sometimes don't survive it. Which is exactly why we need to change things. Sarah squeezed her hand reassuringly. High Elder Vex laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. You want to take the trial. No non-Myrthan has ever survived it. The psychic pressure would crush your mind. Unless, Sarah smiled, human minds really are naturally equipped to handle Myrthan powers. Wouldn't you like to know for sure? The council members spoke to each other, telepathically, their antennae moving in agitation. Finally, High Elder Vex turned back to Sarah. Very well, human. You will have your trial. Tomorrow at dawn. His silver eyes glowed brighter. When you fail, all human contact with Myrthans will be forbidden. Forever. After the council left, Administrator Zax exploded. Dr. Chen, do you have any idea what you've done? The trial of resonance isn't just dangerous. It's designed to test the absolute limits of psychic endurance. Sarah, Kituri's voice shook. Please don't do this. I can go with them. Learn their way. Sarah knelt down to look Kituri in the eyes. Hey, remember what I told you about humans? That you do things you shouldn't be able to do. No, Sarah grinned. That we don't abandon our friends. Besides, she winked. I've been practicing too, you know. As they walked back to Sarah's quarters to prepare, station residents watched them pass. Word of the challenge spread quickly. By nightfall, everyone knew. Tomorrow, either history would be made, or they would watch the first human die in the trial of resonance. But Sarah wasn't thinking about history or death. She was thinking about Kituri, about other scared Myrthan children, and about how sometimes the craziest human ideas turned out to be exactly what the galaxy needed. #The trial. The trial chamber aboard the Myrthan ship looked like the inside of a giant crystal. Rainbow lights danced across its smooth walls, and the air hummed with psychic energy. Sarah stood in the center, wearing a simple white suit the council had provided. Last chance to back out, human, High Elder Vex said from his elevated platform. The other council members sat in a circle around the chamber, their silver eyes glowing. Kituri watched from a small viewing area with Administrator Zax and the station's medical team. Her small hands were clenched tight. I'm ready, Sarah said firmly. She had spent the night meditating, using the techniques she'd learned while teaching Kituri. High Elder Vex nodded. The trial of resonance has 3 stages. Survive all 3, and you prove your worth. Fail, and he left the sentence unfinished. The chamber's hum grew louder. Stage 1. The Mind Storm. Suddenly, Sarah felt thousands of thoughts crash into her mind. It was like standing in a crowd where everyone was screaming different things at once. Most people would have been overwhelmed immediately, their minds crushed by the psychic noise. But Sarah had practiced this. Every time Kituri's powers had flared up, every time they'd trained together, Sarah had learned to handle psychic pressure. She closed her eyes, imagining her mind as a smooth stone in a rushing river, letting the thoughts flow around her instead of through her. Impressive, one council member muttered. But now, stage 2. The memory maze. The 1,000 voices transformed into vivid images, memories from different Murthans throughout history. Sarah saw strange worlds, felt alien emotions, experienced countless lives. It was designed to make her lose herself, to forget who she was. Sarah focused on her own memories, teaching Kateri to control her powers, sharing chocolate cake, their daily talks. She held on to who she was, using her experiences as an anchor. In the viewing area, Kateri jumped up excitedly. She's doing it. Her mind, it's still stable. Impossible, High Elder Vex frowned. No matter. Stage 3. The power push. This was what Sarah had been dreading. Raw psychic energy poured into the chamber, making the crystal walls vibrate. It wasn't just pressure now. It was pure power, the kind that could tear a mind apart. Sarah fell to her knees, sweat running down her face. The pressure was enormous, like being at the bottom of an ocean. Her nose started bleeding. Stop. Kateri tried to run into the chamber, but Administrator Zax held her back. You're hurting her. But Sarah wasn't done. As the power pressed in on her, she remembered something from her research, something about how human brains worked. Instead of fighting the power, she let it in, but not as an invader. She treated it like she treated Kateri's energy during their training sessions, as something to be guided, not blocked. The chamber filled with golden light. The council members stood up in shock. Instead of being crushed by the power, Sarah was channeling it, creating a stable field of energy around herself. Her nose stopped bleeding, and she slowly stood up. That's High Elder Vex stared. That's advanced Murthan energy control. But you're human. Exactly, Sarah said through gritted teeth. We humans don't just resist psychic energy. We can work with it, guide it. That's why we can help young Murthans learn control. The power faded. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, tired but unbroken. She was the first non-Murthan in history to survive the trial of resonance. Tira finally broke free and ran to her, hugging her tight. You did it. You really did it. High Elder Vex descended from his platform, his expression unreadable. It seems, he said slowly, that we have much to learn about humans. He looked at Sarah and Kateri, and perhaps much to learn from them as well. Sarah hugged Kateri back, smiling despite her exhaustion. She had done more than survive a trial. She had opened a door between two species that would never be closed again. And somewhere on Earth, other humans were already preparing for their own journeys to help young Murthans find their way. 6 months had passed since Sarah's trial. Nexus 7 station looked very different now. Where once there had been empty corridors around Kateri's quarters, now the halls buzzed with activity. Young Murthans and human trainers walked together, practicing control exercises and sharing stories. Tiri stood at the front of a small classroom, her purple skin glowing with confidence as she addressed 3 young Murthan students. Each had a human partner sitting beside them. Remember, she said in her wind chime voice, the human mind isn't just a shield. It's like a dance partner. You have to work together. Sarah watched proudly from the doorway. The Human Murthan Academy for Psychic Development had been her idea, but Kateri had become its heart. Who better to teach young Murthans than someone who understood their struggles? Look what I can do. A small green-skinned Murthan boy lifted a row of cups into the air, making them dance. When one started to wobble, his human partner touched his shoulder gently, and the cup stabilized. Perfect. Kateri clapped. See how Tommy helped you. That's the connection we're looking for. The station's cafeteria had a new special section now, the Human Murthan Corner, where chocolate cake was always available. It had become a symbol of friendship between the two species. Even High Elder Vex had tried it during his last inspection visit, though he pretended not to enjoy it. After class, Sarah and Kateri walked to Administrator Zax's office for their weekly meeting. They passed several other human Murthan pairs practicing in the corridors. The security drones that once followed Kateri everywhere were gone, replaced by friendly waves from station residents. The latest reports are excellent, Zack said, his two mouths smiling as they entered. 0 incidents of power loss, significant improvement in control metrics, and he checked his tablet, 17 new applications from Earth for training physicians. Humans really love helping, don't they? Kituri grinned at Sarah. We really do, Sarah agreed, especially when chocolate cake is involved. A message flashed on Zack's screen. The Galactic Council wanted to expand the program to other stations. More and more young Murthans were being discovered, no longer hidden away by scared parents. Did you ever think, Kituri asked later as they shared their traditional end-of-day cake, that this would happen when you first sat down with me? Sarah thought back to that first day. Honestly, I just saw someone who needed a friend. Everything else. She waved at the busy station around them. This was all you, Kituri. You were brave enough to trust me. And you were crazy enough to not be scared of me. Kituri giggled. A small commotion at the cafeteria entrance caught their attention. A new human trainer had arrived with a tiny blue Murthan girl hiding behind her legs. The girl looked terrified, just like Kituri used to be. Without hesitation, Kituri walked over to them. Hi, would you like some chocolate cake? It helps with first-day nerves. Trust me, I know. The new girl looked up, her silver eyes wide. You're the one from the stories. The first one who learned from a human. That's me, Kituri smiled. And now I help teach others. Want to learn how to float cake without dropping it? It took me 3 tries to get it right. Sarah watched as Kituri led the newcomers to their table, already chatting about training techniques and funny stories about human Murthan misunderstandings. The nervous new girl was smiling now, her antenna perking up with interest. This was the real revolution, not just humans helping Murthans, but Murthans helping each other. The fear that had isolated them for generations was being replaced by understanding, one chocolate cake at a time. As the station's artificial sun began its evening cycle, casting golden light through the windows, Sarah looked at her young friend teaching the newcomer. Kituri wasn't the scared little alien anymore. She had become something more, a bridge between 2 species, a teacher, a friend. And it all started because one human wasn't afraid to sit down at a table with a lonely little girl who just needed someone to believe in her.